we need to listen. They're in that position every day. They can come to me with some ideas. I can give some experience, then let them at the end of the day decide what they want to do if they're in that management position or whatever. And so I've been able to change that and not be, I was never a micromanager, but I was like, well, this is what I said, so this is what we should do. Like I've changed that mindset from, well, I don't know. What do you want to do? What are your ideas? I'm going to sit back and listen.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Rich Your Soul. Today's guest is Alane Boyd, who will share her journey and how to find your fit. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Rich Your Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richyoursoul.com. How clear are you on your strengths and natural tendencies? Are you working and living in alignment with those? I know for me, I felt like a square peg in a round hole for a good part of my life, but I figured out how to find the square hole. Does that make sense? No, but here's the bottom line. You get to choose, you get to pick, you've got to figure out what those things are for you and then find the alignment for you. Our guest is Alane Boyd. She is co-founder of Workday Ninja. It's an operations and growth strategy expert specializing in AI and automation. She's had tremendous entrepreneurial success, and she's built agencies and software companies and featured in a lot of top publications. Let's meet her and see what we can learn. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Alane Boyd. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you, Rocky. I'm really excited to be here.
And I am excited for our conversation as well. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
You know, my dad was an entrepreneur and he owned an insurance agency, and he was really the one to always teach us budgeting, because I like to spend as a kid. You know, I always worked, I always had money, and my dad always tried to influence where he could, not spending everything. And even as an adult, when I got my first job, how important it was to put some of that money into my 401k and just making better money decisions. And when I told him I wanted to upgrade my vehicle after graduation, you know, he helped me work on budgeting that. So he was a big influence on how you do things. And then looking now as I'm an adult and my parents are elderly, how much they set themselves up for having a great retirement. And so I just saw that at an early age from him instilling that.
It doesn't sound like there was the roller coaster ride of entrepreneurship with him.
He didn't. My dad is a very interesting person. He never worked that hard, and he just really stuck by his boundaries of what he thought he should be doing. And he had a great life. My mom, she stayed home with us until we went to school. And then she worked a full-time job at a bank, but so that we had great benefits and other things just in case we ever needed something. You know, we had if my dad's business went afloat or whatever, we always had her income. But I never saw my dad stressed. He always was the one to pick us up from school, take us to every sporting event. My younger brother and I did every sport you can imagine. When we had a doctor's appointment, he took us. He just lived the life that most entrepreneurs are trying to achieve.
Do you know how he was able to achieve that? Like, where did that come from?
I don't know what happened in his life for him to instill these things, because his dad abandoned them when he was 9 years old. He had two brothers. He was the middle child and left in the middle of the night and never came back. And everything he achieved because he figured it out on his own. I think it was a mix of charisma and pure determination. And, he went to art school for 2 years in college, and he realized, I'm never going to support a family on a art teacher salary. So he dropped out. He doesn't have a college degree. He started working for an insurance agency and said, I could do this, and started his own and took off from there.
That's incredible that he was able to do that, and that he was so intentional, and he didn't have to deal with the roller coaster ride. And he did what all business owners say they want to do, which is work less, make more, have the freedom. And yet so many of them are kind of on the hamster wheel.
Yeah. And when I was young, I remember he had a huge office, and he probably had 20 people working for him. And one day he's like, you know what? I don't like this. And he downsized it to where it was just him and two people, because he realized, I'm making just as much money as I want to make, having a small team with less fires to put out. And I have more flexibility than when I had a 20-person company. And even he sold his agency in his 70s and worked out a deal with a company that was taking him over. And he was like, this is what I'm going to do. Take it or leave it. And they took his deal that he offered them.
It's funny because too often we chase the money and we don't realize that we have the choice to set our boundaries. And you said that earlier. He set his boundaries and he stayed within them. Mm-hmm. And I think too often we also don't realize that when you grow the business, the stress levels go up, the work levels go up. And if you do it right, you don't need to have all of this overhead. And I think too often we don't focus on that.
I agree. And I really thought about my first company that I ran and how many things I would change different now. And you hire more people to do the work, but you don't pay yourself any differently. And I think this is what you really come in and help companies do, or business owners do, is why are you doing more and more and more and paying more and more people, but you're not taking care of yourself?
And I think that is a big problem. And it's an epidemic, I think, with business owners. So you got these lessons, but then you built your company and you went the opposite way.
You take for granted what your parents do, and I even asked my dad one day, like, Dad, he had 6 kids, like none of us took over the company that you built. And I asked him, like, why didn't you groom any of us? And he's like, none of y'all cared. Y'all wanted to do your own thing. And I was there to support you to do your thing, not what I built. But God, that would have been so easy to take over that. And that's where I think, you're young and you just think, man, I'm just going to pour everything I have into this company and build it up. And you don't realize what the stress is doing to you, that there are other options. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago, I looked back at what my dad had done and I said, he knew what he was doing. Whether he knew it or not, he had it figured out. And now I really look to him on like how he built things and not being stressed, because that stress, it ate me alive. It was killing me.
So tell us about that. What happened? You built up your agency.
Yeah, I built up my agency over about 11 years. And I had 125 employees, and that's a lot, a lot. And I didn't have any guidance. I was in my 20s to my mid 30s, so I'm just figuring things out as things came, I was figuring it out. I didn't have any leadership. I didn't have any mentors, coming in. And I just kept taking on more and more and more and more and handling huge contracts too. You've got these huge corporations that are very demanding. You've got employees that need help, and it's a lot of pressure on you. And so over that course of time, I just carried more stress, and I started having these episodes where my face would completely swell. Like I looked, my friend called me the Walking Dead because I looked just like a zombie, and I couldn't even see. Sometimes my eyes would be so swollen shut, I couldn't open them. And what I finally figured out after about a year of having these episodes and starting having them more and more often is it was from chronic stress, and it was an autoimmune disease called angioedema.
Mm.
So I had to learn how to reverse that and not be under chronic stress. And that is so hard to do. I mean, Rocky, I don't know if you've ever, chronic stress is because you've put yourself in that situation so often. To unwind your brain to say, I'm not going to be stressed, I'm not going to put myself in a situation. It took me 2 years to unwind that, to not have another episode once I figured it out.
And it's all up to us, to what we create. When we create those conditions, they seem normal, even though they're not normal, right? The body will revolt. Whether or not we listen is a different story. But then to change that and to clean up, it's not going to be, it doesn't just happen overnight. It takes time.
It took time to get there. So it's like gaining weight, right? You know, it takes maybe 5 years for you to gain 40 pounds. You're not going to lose that 40 pounds in a month.
No.
It takes time to lose it because it took you time to get there. So the same thing with stress is you didn't just wake up being stressed all the time. It took years of implementing that feeling.
So what changed that you decided to do something about it?
One of it was I didn't know what was causing it. I kept thinking it was an allergic reaction. I couldn't figure it out. And once I did, I realized I had to stop taking so many things on. Like that's a wake up call to say I'm doing too many things and learn how to say no. And like, that sounds really easy. Like, oh, you just say no to things. Like, no, there are things that you might enjoy doing that you just can't do. So no, I can't do that. So I had to kind of reteach myself what my boundaries were and take rest. Like, you know, this culture is like, you don't rest, you just hustle all the time. And so I had to start sleeping and getting to bed and not staying up till 1 or 2 and waking up at 6. So going to bed at 9 and just like putting these things that should be our norm were not my norm at all. I had to put in place and then stick to it.
Do you think what you experienced is the norm for what people are doing? Or do you think you were just outside the norm of what most business owners go through?
You know, I've seen both sides of it. And when we got acquired, I saw what some founders do, where they have this capability of not letting things get to them. But for people like me, I absorb that. Okay, you're not going to care. I'm going to care more. And so, you know, I think there is a norm of business owners that are better at protecting themselves. But then there's the me's out there that I think is very common, especially when you have employees, because we want to take care of our team. We, you know, don't want to seem like jerks all the time, just demanding on things of other people. So I think there's definitely a norm there where we're just going to work ourselves to death. We're burnt out. There's always more things to do and the list never gets smaller. From what I've seen, there's a lot of those business owners out there.
So what happened? You sold the agency, and then what happened?
I really just started resting. And part of it was, you know, I just said I'm done when I really figured it out. Because I had to stay on for 18 months through that, and they would have kept me on forever. And one day I just said, you know what, I'm done. I'm done. And and luckily I was in a place that financially I could do that. I didn't have to work. I could take time off. And that's what I did is I just rested and slept, went for a lot of walks, and then just dabbled in some other business ideas I had and hobbies that I wanted to do. So I wrote a cookbook called BurgerFit and, you know, some things just around health that I wanted to focus on.
What did you learn about health during this whole process?
That there's red flags. And I always say I'm so grateful for having those angioedemic episodes, because if not, I wouldn't have changed my lifestyle. And what that looks like is maybe a heart attack or, something else a lot more serious in my future if I hadn't paid a closer attention. What are your red flags? Eczema was another one. I didn't have eczema my whole life until that is my earliest sign that I'm getting too stressed is if I break out with eczema on my hands. And when my eczema gets really bad, that's when I know I'm getting closer to an angioedema episode. So learning what those red flags are is so important because your health could look different. Maybe it's weight gain, or somebody might have like so many females are like, my face is breaking out. Like I'm too stressed. Like, okay, well, what are your signs? And start realizing those earlier so that you're not in a position where it's something life threatening.
And I don't think women think of it that way. Like the men are always worried about heart attacks. But for women, you don't really think about heart attacks as much and some of these things. Yet you're still just as prone, depending on what you do, to being able to deal with that.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point that men versus women, like women just feel like they have to take it on, that there's nobody like you're juggling home and you feel like you have less options, but starting to say, no, this isn't all going to be on me. I need help. We're in this together, or finding, what type of resources you need and speaking out instead of just saying, oh, I can take that on. Oh, I can take that on. And then you're just withering away.
What were some of the best resources you found?
Some of my friends are in some type of natural health care. So I have a friend that does Chinese medicine and acupuncture. And I have another friend that she was a healthy food chef where she did some meal planning for people. And so I just started tapping into those people, and whether buying coaching sessions or acupuncture sections, whatever it was. And those really started changing my perception of what reality is. And we're all ingrained differently. Like growing up, I grew up in Southern Louisiana. We did not eat healthy. We were in the 80s, and there was just no such thing as what you put in your mouth affects how your health is. Like, no, there's just a big gap there in education, and I was lacking it. And so I realized that and started saying, okay, who do I know that knows more than me on these things? You want to build a social media agency? I can help you there, but I cannot help in this, what is healthy and what is a norm that I should be creating for myself. And so that's what I did. And it's looked different ways with different people. Like I had a friend, she was like, why don't you come over and let's cook a meal together? And so we planned ahead of time what we were going to cook. Like I'd never eaten a beet before. I wouldn't even know how to cook a beet. And so she showed me how to cook with beets. We added some goat cheese, some pepitas, and made like a little beet salad. It was delicious. And so I had to what kind of vegetables, how do you cook with? And then the other thing I did was, have you heard of what a CSA is with a farm? Like a farm CSA?
Oh, the shares. Yeah.
Yeah. Community supported agriculture, I think is what the CSA stands for. Then you don't have a choice on what you're buying, and you have to figure out something to cook with it because you've got it. And I even had to tell the farm, I'm like, I'm so not educated in this that I need a list of what these vegetables are. So when I'd go pick up my CSA box, if they didn't already have a list in there, I'd write down what was in there so I could Google recipes with it and know what to cook.
The reason I've never joined one is, to me, it seems like too much work to figure out what to do with what they give me. I'd rather, I know what vegetables I like. We know how to cook them. And so for me, it's easier to say, these are the vegetables I'm going to eat that are healthy, and sticking kind of to that and being a little bit more intentional with it. But again, you're limited, and it's not as fresh as what you're buying because you're getting it from the actual farmers, and you're getting what's in season in your particular area at the moment. So you're more in line with that natural rhythm of what's going on. Yeah, I see when I go to the gym, it's a drop-off location. So there's always
they'll have stuff there.
They'll have the boxes right there for people who have signed up for their shares. And then the other thing is our life is so constantly changing that I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to eat all of this in a week, let alone figure out how to cook it this week and do all of that. So again, you have to figure out what works for you.
Yeah. One of the fun things we did, so my company that I started, it was in San Diego, and we had a big team there. In San Diego, people are just very healthy in California for the most part, especially along the coastal cities there. And so one of the things everybody wanted to do was join a CSA as a company, and we'd have the box delivered there. Everybody would take home the veggies. They'd pick something, take home, and they'd cook it. And then the next day we would have a potluck together with everything. And we had so much fun with that. The employees loved it. And it was a great, just like team building thing we did once a week together.
Oh, nice. And so how quickly were you able to recover from what you had been through?
It took about 2 years for me to not have another episode after that. And I kind of had to learn some things about myself is after I quit and I started working on my health more and de-stressing is it took a little bit of time, but then about a year later, I started having back-to-back episodes again. So I realized it wasn't the company putting demands on me. I didn't have that anymore. It was me personally putting demands on myself. And I realized really how we think that it's outside things affecting us, but it's really our decision on how we're handling things. And so I immediately, when I realized that, I was like, oh, this is me doing this to myself. I was immediately able to make a change after that. And I haven't had that. Let's see, my last episode was 2020. So I sold my company in 2018. And then my last episode was in 2020. And I haven't had one since.
Congratulations on that. Yeah, I remember this old saying, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you choose to react to it. Because somebody else can have the same thing that happened to you and they can choose a totally different path, a totally different reaction, and a totally different way of dealing with it. And that is a choice.
Yeah. And, over the last couple of years too, I've been really thinking about what you just said and how the people that you hang out with influence that too. And I realized my circle was very negative, and that was influencing how I think about things. And so I've been really working towards finding the relationships that keep things positive, and that when things bad happen or just anything happens, like what's the perspective that they take versus the victim mentality. Because I can fall into a victim mentality. And so I don't want to. That's a horrible place to be in. I want to be in the proactive, like, no, I can change things. The way I perceive things can be different. And so making sure I surround myself with those people.
So you've started a new company. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you do now? Yeah.
In my previous company, what I really loved doing as a owner was the operations and efficiency side of things. And so we had such a well-oiled machine. And when we got acquired, we had to stay on, I mentioned, for 18 months. And really their goal was the systems we had put in place, they wanted us to put in place there. And through that, and I always say, like, I don't regret, although it was really hard and I was miserable, I don't regret it because it was such a learning experience for me on things that I took for granted about myself. And so now with my new company at Workday Ninja is the name of it. And we go into companies and help them figure out where they can automate, delegate, and eliminate in their workflows. And we use a combination of AI and a combination of automation and just help them better scale or have better efficient workflows.
How much time are they able to save by doing that?
typically, and it can be per workflow, but it's 20 minutes per person per day at a minimum, which is equivalent to saving that one employee a month per year. Now, some of the employees can be a bigger impact. So for like new client onboarding, for instance, you have a handoff between sales and account management. Companies will have an admin sometimes in between, and it typically takes on average 2 hours to onboard a new client, is what we found out of all of our engagements. And we eliminate that work because it's all automated. That handoff is all automated. So you're eliminating 2 hours of work per new client being onboarded. And so it can be looked at per workflow, how much time can be saved. Another client, we saved 40 hours per month on just automating reports. So their account management team didn't have to go and pull those manually.
I find a lot of business owners struggle in this area because there's two parts to it. They've got to do the work to build the systems, and they always seem to be running around with their hair on fire. So they don't have the time. The second thing, and I don't know, maybe you can tell me, I find people who know how to build operations and systems are unique in that there aren't a ton of them, and most people are actually not very good at this, which was super surprising to me.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. And even companies that have a project manager, and project managers, I mean, we love them, but project managers are good at making sure a system is being followed, not at building a system. And so, you're right on the type of person that it is to build the operations is the most rare personality type. They're architects, and that's their personality type. It's an architect. That's what they are. And they're rare. And it really does take a special person because you got to visualize. You have 5 different departments, 5 different things happening, maybe 100 things happening. And you need somebody to look at that and not be overwhelmed and to visualize how that needs to look like in a workflow. And most business owners aren't good at that. They're good at whatever they sell. And it's not operations that they're selling. They're good at whatever they do. And so they really do struggle. And a lot of companies don't have these things in place because it is a unique person. And a lot of times the company can't afford a full-time person to do this.
And you don't necessarily need you need a full-time person probably to build it. But like you said, you don't need that person to maintain it and to run it. It's a separate skill set. And I think that's where a lot of business owners get confused because they go, oh, I hired a project manager. They'll build the system, but that's not their skill set.
No, a lot of them get really overwhelmed. And when a company has a project manager, that's our favorite kind of company to work with because they have a champion and somebody that can maintain the system once it's built. But they're getting just as overwhelmed. You can't be the person to build the system and maintain it because that is 2 different personality types. Somebody that's going to maintain it, you want a bulldog. You want somebody that's going to be making sure they're being proactive. They're checking those projects. They're checking those tests. They're following up. The person that's behind the scenes building it is not that person, and vice versa.
And I think that's where people get confused. They don't realize the skills required for these types of things.
And it's very technical on building it. You don't have to be a software developer, but you need to be tech savvy. You need to understand how to read API documentation and know how 2 software platforms can talk to each other. That's a different skill set than somebody that can manage a project.
Oh, that's very true. Is how do you get the systems to talk to each other and be able to do that? Do you find as you go through this process that a lot of what they're doing is just irrelevant? Like it's not even necessary to do half the stuff they're doing, but they do it because that's the way they always did it?
So that's why we have a portion of our methodology is automate, delegate, eliminate. We do find a portion of it can be eliminated. And some of it is inconsistency because they have 5 different people doing it and they have 5 different ways of doing it. And so there's a part of it that way. And there's a part of it that just needed to be templatized. have an email template for your welcome email. Like it's certain things that they're just doing haphazardly. So I don't always find like, oh, this is the way we've always done it, so we're going to do it this way. It usually has some place in the system but it could be automated. Like, oh, you're printing out the papers and then filing them. Like, you don't need to do that. We can just put it in Dropbox, like something like that could be translated to a more digital way. I do see a lot of manual things that don't really fit in a modern tech stack being done anymore. That could be just completely done away with. Like, you don't need to print that out anymore. Like, that's irrelevant. People have QR codes. They can scan those and you don't need to print everything out.
And that's true. So how have you maintained the new company without getting sucked in?
Well, I mean, we just really learned a little bit about like what types of clients do we want? Everybody wants great clients. There's a certain ideal customer profile, and we had to really learn who that was so that we're taking on clients that value what we do. Too small of clients, they don't have the pain points yet. They realize they need these things, but it's not super painful because they don't have enough employees that are sucking the time out of their lives. So, we really had to get good. Okay, what type of clients do we want? And we vet our employees during the interview process. And I think one of the best things is like when we hire somebody, it's for a certain skill set, but we also implement when we hire somebody, what other skills do they have? Do they have knowledge on other platforms that maybe we're not offering right now, or we don't have a client? But then it's not my business partner and I figuring things out when we get a new client. No, we know what people on our team have the skills for that new client coming on board, and that we can always do a match.
So are your employees actually the people building the systems for the other people, correct?
Yeah. I can talk about systems. I get the bigger picture, but I'm not the best person to go and implement the solution. I need somebody a lot more tech savvy than me for the implementation.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must-listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. How do you figure out through the interview process who is that person who has that architect skill set?
So we do a 3-part interview process. First one is a very normal interview, just making sure they're kind of culture fit with us, review their resume, ask them some questions. The second part is we give them a skills test. We email it over to them, and it's under 30 minutes. We don't want them working for, days on the skills test, but it's under 30 minutes, and they have to record a Loom video of explaining what they built. So we make sure they didn't have their brother, sister, cousin, best friend actually build the system. And so we can hear, just like there's a million different languages out there to speak. You can say things in different ways. The same way with automation. You can build an automation sequence a number of different ways. There's not one right way. And so we want to see how they built it, what their thinking is. And then we always put a couple of bugs in the data that we give them, and to see if they catch it. Because we want the people that are detail oriented. And then we also have a personality test that they take. So super quick, less than 10 minutes to find out, are they that architect personality type?
What personality test do you use for that?
We're moving to Culture Index.
Okay.
So I don't know if you've heard of that one. We like that
I have.
one. And then there's one, it's just like it's free, 16 personalities test is what we have been using.
That's based on Myers-Briggs.
It is. Yep.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, I just recently took the culture index for an event that I went to. I'm the philosopher.
Oh, that seems perfect for exactly who you are. I wouldn't be surprised.
And I think in Myers-Briggs, I know the letters, but I think the letters kind of correspond to architect. Do you know the letters in Myers-Briggs or no?
I don't know them by heart. The architect, I know it starts with an I, like it's an IN.
TJ?
I think, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
There's a philosopher's, yeah, architect. Okay, so it's an INTJ is the architect personality type.
That's me.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And the other thing, like I know my DISC profile too. So I'm high D, high C, which means I can make decisive action, but I'm extremely cautious in eliminating all the risks when I do so.
Oh.
And so we build things that are robust. And so it's funny. It took me a greater part of my life to figure out the value of those skill sets and how they are best used. I had no clue. And I think that prevented me from finding the right fit for me in the right places. And in learning that, I could then reverse engineer and build things the way that I needed them built for me instead of getting stuck in the wrong fit, so to speak.
So I'm an entrepreneur in 16 personalities. So I'm an ESTP is what I am. And then in Culture Index, I'm a persuader. And what I think is interesting too, that I didn't realize until talking more with Culture Index, it's about, you as a personality. So, learning about yourself, but also learning who you work best with. So I was figuring out there's certain personalities that just irritate me. And so working with them, if I'm hiring them for my team and I got to work closely with them, I need to be knowledgeable on that. So I'm not hiring the people that really annoy me, even though they might be good for the job. If we don't work well together, then that's not going to be a great hire. So I had to figure out through that is like, okay, what's complementary to my skill set that I work well with? And that makes a huge difference, especially as I build my team with this company. So we kind of started on this as like, how do you hire the right people so you're not working all the time? That made a big difference because if I'm hiring people that annoy me, then I'm not going to want to give them work and I'm just going to keep taking things on. So making sure that I trust that they can do the job, that I enjoy doing the work with them, and that I can delegate to them, that's super important.
It's also being able to create a communication platform that allows the two of you to communicate in a way that's effective for both of you. So let's just say that you don't want a ton of details. You can tell the person, I don't want all the details. Give me the high level synopsis. You can do the details. I want you to do the details. I don't want you to tell me the details, right?
Yes.
Or I need to know these things to be answered in order for me to make a decision. So please make sure you answer these three things in this kind of a format. And then that way the communication becomes easier. And when you look at all of the different things, and there are so many different personality tests, I don't say that one is the best. I think looking at them, each one has its own place, and together they give you a really good picture.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I'm like smiling the whole time that you said that, because one of the things we started doing, so I also have a software company. So my software is called Arvo, and it's for documentation, SOPs, training things, creating a knowledge base. And one of the things that we do is, because now we've all taken the personality test, right, during the hiring process, is we have a template that every employee uses when they come on board for building a personality playbook. And it has in there like things outside of work. What are your hobbies? Do you like dogs? Whatever it is about you that you like, you put in there, but you also put in your personality type. and how you like to be communicated with. And that is my first thing on mine is don't give me the details, give me bullets. So what you just said is exactly true. I get extremely overwhelmed if you just give me this long paragraph to read. My brain shuts down. Give me 3 bullets. I'm good.
Yeah. And it's also knowing your role and your purpose. So like I know as an integrator, my job is to keep a visionary in place and be able to say yes, yes, no, no to them to keep them focused, or they'll be in 100 million different, rabbits going off. And it's getting that total understanding of how do you bring them all together.
Yeah. It's been fun. And we say each of us saves our personality profile in our Slack. So like we use Slack and you can, so when new hires come, they can read about you. Whoever the manager is for that employee coming on board sends a welcome email with their personality playbook linked. And like these things that just kind of help people work together, because it took me years, like in my first business, how I told you, like I had no leadership skills, no mentor helping me. I wasn't in any of those entrepreneur groups that would have been so helpful for me. And I just thought everybody communicated like me. I was naive and stupid.
I was just like you.
And so I was so ignorant, like thinking that people were different. And it was so painful at times because I didn't understand how we are all different and how we communicate differently.
And that's very true. I just got an idea. I'm wondering if when you're going to send an email to somebody, you could write the email, throw it into AI and say to AI, rewrite this for this.
Yes.
And then it would take your information and it would change it to the format that would best suit that person. And then you just off you go and be the translator. I'm try that
after we get off the call. I love that idea.
That might be cool. Because you can also teach AI, like you can give it all those different personality profiles and have it. And so you can just go into that particular one each time and go, here's the email, make it work for Matt in the way that he needs to be communicated to.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that with clients, even maybe you don't know their personality type, but after you work with them for a while, like, some want more details, some don't want as much. Like I like that concept a lot.
Well, either that or make your clients take a personality test as part of their onboarding.
Hey, this is something super fun we want to do. Like fill this out so I know who you are. And Enneagram is getting so popular too. You could even probably use it in association with Enneagram.
Enneagram's another one that I've done. And I keep trying to remember where I kind of fit, because it's a little bit more wishy-washy for me with Enneagram. I'm not as clear cut as I am with the other ones. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. But again, each one adds a different layer. And what I've also found is, depending on the position, certain ones are better than others for a particular type of position.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
And so knowing that and being clear on it. So you mentioned you didn't really have a lot of support systems in the past, but now you're part of EO, correct?
Yeah.
How has that helped you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I was so isolated in my first business. I just hunkered down and worked all the time. And like a lot of times I felt like I had no options because I didn't know any other options. I knew nobody building and scaling a company like I was. And so now with EO, I feel so inspired by some of the people in my group, in my forum. I feel like you're not as an entrepreneur. A lot of times you're with your friends. They're not always entrepreneurs. It's hard to relate. And it gets a bit lonely because what do you have about conversation? Unless you have a hobby that you have in common, your perspective on work is different. When you're an employee, versus a business owner, very different from taking a paycheck from giving a paycheck. And so that was one of the biggest things being around EO is like, oh my gosh, like I can talk about business things to people, get ideas, get inspiration. And the other thing is I had to be moderator of my forum. When I joined, I was the moderator. And being a moderator, that means like you're the leader of your group. So there was 8 of us total, including myself. I'm the moderator. When you have to be a leader of a group of entrepreneurs, that is next level leadership. And so I went and started, like, EO offers so many leadership training things. And a lot of times it's just a part of what you pay. So some of them are free, some are paid. And I just started taking advantage. And I was like, my eyes have just completely opened to how to lead people, how to not tell people what they should be doing, but to do something from an experience share that you have it's completely different. Like, Rocky, if you and I were having a conversation, you're like, man, Alane, like, I'm having this problem. And instead of telling you how I'd solve it, I just say, you know what? I ran into that too. This is some things that I did, and I have no expectations of what you do after that. That is the change in my mindset, is that I shared from my experience. I'm not telling you what you should do. And I have zero expectations at the end of that conversation. Because sometimes feelings can get hurt. Well, I told them what they should do and they didn't listen. Or, and you do that with your employees sometimes. Like, well, I told them they should do this, this, and this, and they didn't. Well, as a leader, maybe that's not our job. They're in that position every day. They can come to me with some ideas. I can give some experience, then let them at the end of the day decide what they want to do if they're in that management position or whatever. And so I've been able to change that and not be, I was never a micromanager, but I was like, well, this is what I said, so this is what we should do. Like, I've changed that mindset from, well, I don't know. What do you want to do? What are your ideas? I'm going to sit back and listen.
And again, it comes back to us changing us.
That is what It all comes down to.
It is. Interesting. Anything else that you learned through EO?
I think some of it is also, I can get kind of set in my own box and thinking, my company is too niche, or, nobody out there is my target customer, whatever story I'm telling myself that day. And by being an EO and just, we can't sell to each other in EO. We're not there to market it to each other. We're there to be a support for each other and to grow in our knowledge. And what I learned is when I stopped trying to sell all the time and just try to meet people, is that's when people want to work with you. You go to an event and you're just there like, hey, I'm Alane and I'm here to listen to the speaker. Like, you don't have expectations of other people. And then that's when I started getting referrals. People started, saying like, hey, you know what, maybe you could solve this problem. Like, I had to kind of just tone myself down a notch.
And that's counterintuitive, isn't it?
It's really hard at first.
It is. There's a lot of things in life that, we try too hard.
Just kind of go with the flow. Like, enjoy. Like, it was hard for me to understand the concept of, well, number one, relaxing, but just go into something to enjoy it. Like, no, like I always had these high expectations, and then like, no, you can just go to something to have fun and meet other people and make a friend or make a connection, whatever it was. And then whenever those barriers come down between you and the other person, then you can have a conversation. And then, they're a little more curious. You're more curious now, listening instead of just talking about yourself all the time. So a lot of things I just had to just sit back and relax a little bit.
And you run multiple companies, don't you?
I dabble, yes.
Okay.
I've got my BurgerFit company, and I don't do it as much now. I've written a couple of cookbooks and stuff, but during COVID, it just got really taxing to have a food company. And so I do have that, and it runs a bit on autopilot. But within Workday Ninja, I also have my software Arvo. So I'm running both of those at the same time.
And you're working less.
Yes, I'm working less than I ever have in my life.
That's nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm having fun. If that's possible, I am actually having fun.
Well, and that's what you're supposed to do, right? Life is supposed to be fun. And I think we make it too difficult.
Yeah. I love doing speaking engagements. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I've started really honing in on this concept of getting out of office. And it doesn't mean getting out of office for a vacation. It can just be getting out of office at the end of your day. So you can go to dinner, you can go to your kid's sporting event, you can go for a workout, whatever that, doing something healthy for yourself instead of feeling like I've got to work till 11 p.m. again tonight. Just get out of the office and
Oh
whatever
my
that
God.
means.
I don't think I've ever worked till 11 p.m.
Rocky, you're amazing.
Well,
We need to
because
reverse roll this conversation.
I get tired. I'm like, at some point, I'm just like, enough. I can't do anymore. Right. And I
Mm-hmm.
shut down. There are evenings where, and it's usually because I was out doing other stuff. So I was taking time off, which then squished. And so I need to work a little bit longer. But otherwise, my goal is to be done by 5, 6 o'clock every day and to keep a lot of what I call wiggle room or buffer zones
Oh,
so that I
yeah.
am not up against everything all the time.
Yeah.
And to also know how much is enough
Mm-hmm.
and
That's
being okay
so
with that.
smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, that travel can really mess with the ability to execute. And so how you've set up your systems or your contracts is so important. And then like for me, it's like, what team do I have in place to make sure things are continuing to run? Because that's the worst when you come back and it's like, well, I tried to take a break, but now I've got days of work and late nights ahead of me is a horrible feeling to have.
No, and I've learned what I do now is I block calendar. So if I'm gone for a
Mm,
week, I block the week ahead and behind so that I have that extra time. I'm
yeah.
not trying to do everything plus make up for the week. And by doing that, it's worked out well. And I've also learned to say no to trips because
Mm.
I'm like, yeah, that's too much. I'm not going to do that. Like pick and choose and say yes and no and be okay with that. And for the most part, I am.
Yeah, I'm learning that one, Rocky, on the trips, learning to say no. I have one right now that I'm like, it's just not a smart business for me to do both of these at the same time. I'm going to say
Right.
no to one of them. And it's a hard thing to let go of that idea. Like, well, they want me to come here and do this speaking engagement, but I've got this other thing that I'm planning. Where's my value going to be and where am I going to feel like my time is best spent?
I've also learned that things are a lot more flexible than I imagined. And so
Mm-hmm.
when you push back, things change. And so you can say, hey, look, I'd love to come, but I can't come this date. Are there other dates that are available?
Yeah.
And then that's where, and it depends on the situation or what's going on, but that gives you a lot more flexibility. And I've learned to be much more flexible like that. And it's taken
Mm-hmm.
a while, but we kind of get there little by little.
I think that's a hard concept. I know I've been in that situation where you just say that doesn't work for me, but is there another option?
Yeah.
Or, just like people are so scared of saying, I can't do it right now. Or like I heard a story of it's a VP of a corporation. And she was like, my grandfather died and I had this huge meeting and I couldn't go to the funeral. She said, it wasn't that my boss told me I couldn't go. It was that I didn't even ask. And how many situations do we do that where we don't even ask the question?
Mm-hmm. You'd be shocked at how unimportant things are, right? Go to the funeral. Like, seriously,
Yeah,
just go. Enough.
exactly.
You have to. And otherwise, you're going to have your own early funeral and no
Mm-hmm.
one will come because they're all too damn busy for you.
Yes. I mean, there's so much truth in that. We're working ourselves to death and we're not even throwing up a red flag saying this isn't working. Can we make a change? We're just
And you
going with
have to throw
it.
up
Yep.
the red flag, figure out what works for you, set your boundaries, reverse engineer them, build out your systems and processes, and things can move pretty easily if you choose.
Yeah. And you're
And because
smarter
I work with,
people.
because I work with so many business owners, I can see it. Some are
Mhm.
stressed and others are like, no, not stressed, no big deal.
Yeah.
And so it's all cool.
Hmm.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Realizing that work-life balance isn't a thing and life should always trump work.
Yeah. Work's a 4-letter word. Well, I guess so is life, but yeah. Live
Yeah.
life. The
Live
work will
life.
always be there.
Yes.
What did you learn later in life that you wish should have learned sooner?
To ask for help.
Yeah, as business owners, we don't ask for help enough, do we?
Mm-mm.
And letting go of the ego of asking for help.
That ego, that was my biggest problem.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Don't go to college, go to work.
And I agree with you. I know there's this big emphasis on college. As a matter of fact, the other night, my wife and I were out to dinner and the waiter was a college student and he's going to college to learn entrepreneurship. I'm like, that is the biggest oxymoron I've ever heard of. Like,
Yeah.
Seriously, take your money, go start a business.
Yeah.
Don't waste your time in college because they have no clue how to run a business because most of them have spent their life not doing that.
Yeah. And if you decide, a lot of 18-year-olds, they don't know what they want to do exactly yet. They have an idea.
Correct.
It may not be what they end up doing. Go work, go start a business, figure it out. And then if you need a college degree, you can always go get one. It is not going anywhere. And college is so expensive now. Use that money to start a business. And you're going to be very valuable. If you decide you don't like entrepreneurship, you are going to be so valuable to an employer because you have learned so much more.
And I think those are the things people just don't realize. And it took me till much later in life to realize that. So now we share. People can learn faster.
Yeah.
If people would like to learn more about you or your companies, where's the best place for them to do that?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. I love connecting. Alane Boyd is my LinkedIn profile. And then my websites are workdayninja.com and askarvo.com.
And we will put those in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rocky.
Have you ever taken any personality tests to see how you tick? Does your work in life come into alignment with that? I know for a long time I was out of alignment with who I really was. We talked about a few different tests and finding the perfect fit. And you got to figure out what those true strengths are and where you belong. And that was kind of what I had to do. Now it's all fun. So are you clear on this? By the way, do you know someone who would benefit from listening to today's episode? Would you do me a favor and share it with them? I would appreciate that. Thank you. Next week, we've got more Mark Jordan on. We're going to talk about embracing the journey, shifting from the pursuit of perfection to celebrating progress. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.